September 1909, my Turkish grandmother, who was, well, actually she was half Swiss, half English, but she was married to a Turk, fleeing the political situation in Turkey, arrived heavily pregnant in Bournemouth. You could say she was an asylum. She wasn't classified as an asylum seeker. She unfortunately died having my father in childbirth, but he was brought up in Bournemouth. So I'm thinking to myself, let's not imagine that this is a place, a gloomy, awful thing to happen to these asylum seekers, to be on a barge in Bournemouth. I look at Bournemouth, I look at Dorset as the most wonderful, wonderful county. And they're not going to be imprisoned on the barge. They can go out and about. They can help with the harvest, for example. They can visit Thomas Hardy's country. So, in a nutshell, yes, it's unfortunate that fire safety issues have arisen, but I bet they'll be sorted out, and these people will be safely housed in Dorset, in that lovely town of Bournemouth, where my grandmother is actually buried, and in due course their claims will be heard, and if they're not claims, they'll go back.
It doesn't sound like much of a deterrent, Stanley, when you spell it out like that. It sounds rather like an attractive holiday camp.
Well, I'm not sure that the object of the exercise of this thing is to be a deterrent. The deterrent is what is envisaged in the, if you don't have a legal claim here, you'll go to Rwanda. Now, that part of the deterrent, which is a very, very key part of government policy, is not yet in place. But I don't think you can see this barge as a deterrent. You know, there was a plan, I remember, for Irish students still housed on the barge at one stage, when in a previous life, I think it was in County Cork.
Do you think that the way in which we go about regulating these things in the United Kingdom is perhaps too overzealous? After all, the Dutch have used this barge very recently and didn't seem to have these problems with fire safety inspections that we've suddenly come up with.
Well, tell that to the people from Grenfell Towers. You know, I mean, was that an overzealous inspectorate? I think it'd be hard to say it had been overzealous. It obviously missed a trick.
Well, some might argue that the Warms Home Directive actually made that worse, that the regulation could have made the situation with that cladding even worse than otherwise.
The wider issue is actually that the government does have to get its act in order as far as the immigration issue is concerned. And I go back, of course, you were going to say, oh, you're just a Remainer, aren't you? But I go back and I say, look, for heaven's sake, we had a system when we were within the EU, it was so-called the Dublin Agreement and so on and so forth, which had a system for sending asylum seekers back to the country first entry.
Although more went back to the United Kingdom when we were out of the United Kingdom under that system.
It's a different ethnic which is coming in now. We have to get it right. I don't think we'll get it right immediately, but as far as this barge is concerned, the question is, will they be able to drink low-alcohol beer? That is the point.
Well, I would have imagined a lot of people on that barge don't drink any beer at all, would be my guess. I mean,
goodness me. Well, I suppose one of the annoying things about this all is that everyone has to be at the cost of the taxpayer until their claim is heard. Until their claim is heard, they can't work, they can't make money, they can't benefit the local economy.
Tom, you've raised a very, very good point. It is complete nonsense that these asylum seekers are not allowed to work. It is nonsense. I mean, there we have, on the one hand, the government crying out for labour.
They could be picking fruit.
Well, there's lots of fruit to be picked in Dorset, I can tell you. Masses of it. And lots of other things. I mean, sheaves.
But again, that would act as an incentive, wouldn't it? And I suppose if the bigger picture of what we want is to discourage people to make that perilous crossing over the channel illegally and to try and come here and game the system, if they suddenly word gets home, not only will you be given a lovely waterside accommodation, but you can also go and earn a living when you're there. That makes us an even more attractive proposition than we already are.
Well, you're weighing things up.
It's a dip. Well, somebody needs to.
Something up. I would say, nonetheless, it is better for these people to have a job, even if it is clear to them all the way along that the fact of that job will not necessarily alter the asylum decision.